Welcome back to Beauty Uncovered, sponsored by Olaplex. This is Danielle Frank, and I'm very excited because we are officially in the fall season. I love fall. I love the spooky season. I love the smell of the apples, the crunch of the leaves, the colors everywhere. Granted, now I live in Florida, so I don't get to see that quite as much, but I still love that whole experience. On top of that, we get into the fun, spooky stuff. But admittedly, growing up, that was not my favorite thing. I was not a big spooky person. However, now I find it a little bit different. I find it a little bit more about what's really out there, what's in the beyond. Well, today we're going to speak to Kepano, who you may know on social media as the light seer. Now, I absolutely enjoy his content simply because, yeah, sure, he talks about how we can connect with energies and be able to see different things and really be grounded in our spirituality, whatever that may be. It all can be connected. But at the same breath, he does have a sense of humor about the spookiness of it all. And that makes it all the more fun. So, with that being said, I want you to join me in a really fun conversation with a really beautiful soul. Kato, I have been looking forward to this conversation for a couple of weeks now.
Yay!
Because, first of all, thank you for coming. This is exciting for me.
And exciting for me as well. Always, meeting someone new, it's like Christmas for me. My family celebrates Christmas, but I have a whole bunch of clients every single day. I'm in session for 9 hours, and every single time the Zoom comes up, I'm like, hi.
Oh no, I'm the same way. That's probably why I do what I do. But it's exciting to get to know someone, and I'm excited to get to know you because you are definitely very interesting life for sure. And yes, I am a person that follows you on social media. So
Yay!
I know some things. And I might have stalked some of your stuff too, because I find it very fascinating.
Thank
So
you.
I want to, first of all, I want to explain to everybody what exactly is a light seer.
Yeah. So it's very confusing.
I'll admit, I have my notes. I have my note because I was reading everything about it and I was going, wow, this is deep. This is a lot.
Oh, deep. I think it's a little too deep for social media, but it is quite deep. So technically in my Hawaiian culture, in Polynesian culture, I am what is considered a high seer, which is different than a psychic and different than a medium, though there are many parallels. I do see spirit energy. I was a child medium, so I saw spirit energy a lot. I do work multisensorily, which is psychic abilities. But as I grew up, my abilities grew up. And I started to be able to now see multidimensionally and vibrationally. And I spent the majority of my life feeling like I was crazy. Just
Well, I
because
imagine.
I was always overwhelmed, and we have different kinds of terms for that. Sometimes we call them synesthetes or synesthesia. And it is aspects of that being able to see color in the sounds, right? Being able to see wording as color, all the synapse and all of the senses get a little confused, right? And though I do not consider myself to be a synesthete, my abilities are synesthetic, psychic, medium wise. But what I prefer to do now with my abilities is to really focus on internal health and practices, because that's where it's kind of evolved towards. But the language of light seer is a little tricky because as a young medium, I was always overwhelmed by energy that felt very dark. Always, things that felt like, ooh, is that an attachment? What is that? And I fed into a lot of that dogmatic belief systems that everything is dark and everything is attachments. But when I started to allow my abilities to mature, I allowed my abilities to grow. And now I learned that I can literally see through a lot of our stigmas and some of our old archaic beliefs that make us feel like everything should be scary. And when I am faced with scary entities, because there's a lot of scary, spooky ghosts out there, my ability allows me to see what's through that. So by being able to look through it, I don't get the fear factor. I don't get the scare tactic that a lot of psychics and mediums have. So I look through it with light. So I have called myself a light seer for a while now. So it's just my choice of seeing light energy.
Admittedly, I got the visualization in my head of like, I see dead people,
Yeah. And that's
like with
why.
being scared as a little kid. So tell me, because I am genuinely curious of what was it that you kind of realized that this was something that was a part of your life? And how did your family like accept all this? Because I mean, I know culturally everything is different from place to place, but I would
Yes.
imagine as a parent, you're going to be like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. So very much like that. When I was a child, I was very, very fortunate to grow up in a household with a lot of intuitives. All of my siblings, and I'm the second eldest, but all of my siblings are very, very intuitive. My father is a high intuitive. My mother always says, "Oh, you didn't get it from me." I'm like, "Ma, we got it from both of you." Right. But because my family is Hawaiian practitioners, there's already a connection to what is out there that is more than you. What is out there that is more than just, maybe God energy. What is
Right.
nature energy like? What is energy like? So they already have a very strong sense of awareness about that. So when they had me and I was speaking to spirit at the age of 3, I was actually seeing spirit younger than that, but I wasn't able to speak about it until the age of 3. When I started speaking to it, for some reason, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid yet. I got afraid later, but I wasn't afraid at the age of 3. And my parents have recordings of me in session with spirit energy and with them, and literally reading all the stuff in the room, which sidebar, one of the reasons why I love social media now, because now you have all these parents who are posting footages of their children in
Oh, I love
communication,
them. I
right?
love them.
Me too. And I say from the very beginning, because people are like, oh, this is so awesome, everyone. My experience is not a solo experience. I am not unique and special more than any other one of these kids. And I specialize in childhood education. There are multiple children that'll be born, with the ability to see in the way that I see. Every child is intuitive, absolutely. So I was just fortunate enough to have my parents not encourage me to turn everything off. So I kept
I was
everything.
going to say, was it, do you think it was because it was nurtured as
I do.
opposed to like, honey, make believe, you know?
Unfortunately, my parents are both educators. So,
Mhm.
because they are educators and because they're also cultural practitioners, they allowed me to be very fertile. Now, that doesn't mean that I wasn't afraid, because I became very afraid when I started to watch scary movies and more. So, my abilities kind of slowed down a little bit, but then they gained momentum again in high school. And then they really kind of took off when I was in college. But I had to really kind of keep my abilities secret. I didn't really come out in terms of my abilities until I was much older. And the day that I finally came out with my abilities, it was so funny because I live in New York City, and I work creatively as well as a director and as a choreographer and as a performer. You know, I've worked in the theater industry since the 1990s. So when I walked in, there's producers who know me and they know me in this way. And I finally came out of the closet on social media and more. And they said, well, we've always known that. We've always known this about you. We were just waiting for you to talk about it. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense.
That's
I've
funny.
always been this way, even as an educator, and I am an educator as well, been educating. I moved to New York in 1998 to teach. So I've always done this in some way. I've always done this.
No, I did see something, it must have been on social media, where you said at one point in your life, you did have to dial it back or you were dialing it back.
Yeah.
Is that what that was? Or was
Yeah.
it that like you just didn't want it?
Well, it was more about dialing it back because of fear of ridicule. And in fact, even to this day, a little bit, even though I blew up on social media, that was never the intention ever. Like, I wasn't intending to like be this person on social media where people are referring to with questions about spirit energy. That was never the goal. The goal was just to teach. Right.
Mm.
So in terms of dialing things back, even on social media, I feel like I got to dial it back a little bit. And I'll have clients that do work with me say, well, why aren't you talking more about this and more about this? And I'll say, people can hardly handle spirit energy. Do you know what would happen if I told them about everything else that's going on out there? It would blow their little cuckoo brains.
So, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, I think it's really fantastic you had that root of your parents and to kind of make sense of it all. But as I was sitting there reading a lot of the stuff on your site, and looking at all the different technical terms and all these
Yeah.
different things, I'm saying like, where did he learn all this? Was it from your parents or did you get an education beyond that?
So that did not come from my parents. And in fact, now I'm at the point where I'm teaching my parents a lot of this different language. And they
Mm.
asked, my father and I had a long conversation last night. He's like, I just don't know how you got all this. And in reality, because I have such a strong connection to spirit energy, the moment I decided that I'm not going to be afraid of spirit energy anymore, all of a sudden I was able to start channeling. And I don't channel not in the sense of, I'm being completely taken over like Whoopi Goldberg and Ghost, not like that, because I'm still in control of my vessel, but I was able to start to intuit all the information that I'm getting from spirit energy world. And
Mhm.
it's because my ability to see tunes into my ability to know, I'm able to now see all these different things that people are talking about and that spirit energy is talking about. So it's literally getting master tutorial lessons from the actual source, as opposed to like, we read this, then we misinterpret it to be this, then we read it again, and then we Google search this, and then we get misinterpretations from this. I'm literally just going to the source. So the language that I use is literally coming from like the most purest form of lesson.
Wow.
And I have lots of teachers that I kind of meet with, that are human, that are alive. But I also have teachers that I meet with that are in spirit.
That is too funny. Do you find that like other seers that you might have met have also tuned into that and have somewhat of the same language?
Yes. So in terms of seer, that high seer is old Polynesian language, right?
Okay.
So, and though I've been trying to incorporate that language on social media, so it's a very empowering thing for other individuals. Well, I don't identify as psychic, but I do identify as a seer. I'm like, yeah, you do. Absolutely, you do. So I love that. There is only one other high seer that I work with, and female, right? I work with her. I have a nephew who has potential to be a high seer. But
I
I don't
saw
have,
that post you did. He's
right.
adorable.
He's so adorable. But I have in my circle of communication, I don't have a lot of people that I can truly bounce off of ideas with in my
Mm.
full capacity. I have mediums that I can bounce off of, and I have psychics. I have human design experts. I have astrologers, but I don't have a lot of people who can bounce off of everything that's going on in terms of what I can see. I know that they exist. I just haven't found them yet. So I
So
know that they're out there.
I was going to say, I know like there's different levels of understanding or of acceptance of
Yes,
this.
absolutely.
And like you said, I can understand why somebody would not necessarily want to like go out there and tell everybody, hey, I'm psychic, whatever, especially
Right.
if you've established a life outside of that.
Yeah.
But, what is your thoughts about the person that is an absolute skeptic? And then there's that in between. I
Yeah.
like to say I'm in between.
Yeah. I
Like,
love
cause
that.
I'll hear someone be like, that sounds good.
Let me tell you,
But it's not like I haven't like spoke to mediums or anything like that. My family, my grandmother, my mother, I mean, that's I didn't realize it when I was a kid. That was what they were very much, that's the
yes.
language they spoke. But I was raised traditional Catholic though. but but the point is that like, how do you deal with that? Because there are these people that are just like science.
Yep.
This is not science. This is
Yep.
not based in fact. But to me, gosh, there's so many mysteries of the universe that
Yep.
we can't base in fact because we don't know.
Well, and here I love that you said that. So I think that skeptics are they're my favorite friends to work with, because a skeptic just needs evidence. And there is so much evidence that we can actually find, just not in the way that we're trained to find it. And
Mm.
for me as an educator, I'm actually very science minded, and I make the joke that I was terrible at chemistry, because I was, but I am very science minded, meaning that I will never prescribe or speak about anything that I myself have not experienced multiple times
Mm.
over and over again. And not just experiencing it, like trying it out in this way. And what happens if we add a little bit of this? But what happens if I did this? Was this circumstantial? Was that environmental? Was that because you were sleepy? Was that because you were full? So I'm always dissecting because I think most of the times when we're tuning into something, you're just hungry or, or you just need a nap. Not everything is spirit. And I think that
Right.
that's one of the big misconceptions, because you'll have a lot of spiritualists who say that everything is spirit. And I say, no, everything is not spirit.
Well, that's one of the things I love about your videos is that you also did debunk a little
Yeah,
bit.
I do.
Like, oh, this is fun, but no.
No. Well,
Oh,
and
that person's genuinely scared. They
yeah.
really do believe, but no.
Well, and I got to tell you, with those kinds of you know um, believers or skeptics, when it comes to the debunking, sometimes I get pushback from a lot of psychics. Actually, why would you say that? There is an attachment in that room, and this is when I try to zoom myself out and really say from the very beginning to all psychics, well, the difference between you and me is that all of my work is experiential, all of my work is scientific, and all of my work is based in education. Meaning, what you just saw as an attachment next to this person, you are correct. There is something that looks like an attachment, but it would be reckless to prescribe that as an exact attachment if you don't have evidence. You
Mm.
know, if we just say that, there are the amount of clients that I get that will say, well, someone told me I had an attachment when I was 20 and I haven't been able to get over it. And they'll be in their 60s. And I'm like, well, that psychic didn't know shit.
Yeah.
Because they're speaking through fear and through judgment. So for me, when I look at that psychic, I will say, stop and pause for a moment. What you see as an attachment, you've just reached your ceiling, meaning you just got to the point where you can't see anymore. Fortunately, I'm at a place where I can see through that. Now, I have some ceilings myself, but that energy is not my ceiling. Meaning that what most people prescribe as attachment to another individual is most likely just I'm undiagnosed anxiety, maybe a little bit of depression, because that is an energy, right? That's not spirit, but that is an energy that actually looks like something. So depression is the most common diagnosis of what would actually not be spirit energy or dark attachment. Is just depression because it looks like that.
So that's something I do find fascinating because you've talked about energies and that you're able to see different energies of different
Yeah,
people and that different mental illnesses might look slightly
yeah,
different.
you do.
I find that fascinating because I also think that, when I hear about stuff and all right, so like maybe one or two things experienced, you sit there and you make a logical thing in your head,
Mhm.
right? You're kind of creating a logic in your head. But then to hear that it could be something as simple as depression or
Yeah.
some kind of issue. How does one differentiate, I guess?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you what it looks like inside of my cuckoo vision, right? So I'll because for the longest time, I would look out my window and see what I assumed was just attachments and dark shadows. So I understand when a psychic or a medium will say, no, that is an attachment. I totally get it because that's the ceiling, right? But we
Mm,
go beyond the ceiling. When you go beyond the ceiling, when you look through light as a light seer, let me explain what depression looks like. Depression is an energy, an actual energy. It is a little darker in form, which is why it usually gets misconstrued as shadow. But it's like this really interesting cloud, but it's not like a solid shape. It has some weight and heavy texture at the bottom, and it wraps itself around the upper torso, going up to the very top of the crown. It wraps itself there, and it'll kind of like sit in that area. And in New York City, I'm always watching, right? So I'll look out of my, 5-story apartment window and I'll look to see how much of this depression energy was moving around other individuals. And what it ends up doing is the longer you have it, it starts to reshape itself to look like a shadow, literally like the outline of your body.
yeah.
And when it does that, then that would be what our equivalent of attachment would be, just because it is connected to you. But that energy literally is like feeding all those like insecurities, like you don't want to get out of bed, you look terrible today. So when I'm talking to someone who says, oh, I'm depressed, I try to pivot that language from the very beginning and I say, no, you are not depressed, you are experiencing depression, because it is not in us. We think scientifically that it is a drainage of serotonin, but it's not. We're not draining our serotonin. Your serotonin is being drained.
Okay, that gets to the next thing because I thought this was fascinating. Holding on to trauma in your body. Now,
Yeah.
speaking of this, I was watching something, and this was just a physical therapist, and she was
Mhm.
talking about releasing trauma in certain
Yeah,
parts of your body.
yeah.
Now, I had never heard of that before. And then I just heard it again on reading on what I was reading up on you.
Yay.
Fascinating concept.
Yeah.
Because I do think that there's a lot of people that, and I could think of people right off the top of my head, maybe myself, that we carry around certain pains all the time and literally have doctors saying, like, no, you're not. Like, we can't figure out what's going on.
Right.
So, what is
What
that?
is that? Well, there are a lot of practitioners who are studied and cultured. There are a lot of somatic practitioners who are working with the somatic system. There are actually a lot of doctors who have written about body coding and body mapping, right? There's lots of books that you can read about this. And I'm fascinated by that kind of work, but for me, it's all visual. So
Mm.
instead of, and I have read the books, but instead of having to go through the full diagnosis, when I'm looking at the internal part of the body, and because my vision is so pronounced and profound, I have to literally choose what I'm going to see. So if I'm right now in the Zoom room with you, Danielle, I can't say, well, let me look at everything that I can see around you because I'm going to get overwhelmed. So if
Right.
I say, let me just look at what's going on inside of the body, then it's literally like this little scan that happens,
Wow.
and that your body will start to light up. It'll literally light up, and you might have a little bit of a green light in one area. You might have a little bit of bruising in one area, a little bit of blue in one area. And I have then had to figure out, well, again, as a science brain, but what does green mean in the body? Because I can see
Oh,
green around the body, but that's aura, and that's different. So green in the body is different. Blue in the body is different. So I have to continually research on my own the way that I see what all these mean. And I can tell you now that for me, blue internally in the body is guilt. So when I'm looking at someone and I find blue, and sometimes it'll be sternum, sometimes it'll be rib cage, sometimes it'll be right hip. When I do it, when I press in, and this is where it gets a little invasive, when I press into that color, all of a sudden I see you at the age of where it started. And sometimes
oh,
it's like the first relationship, sometimes it's old, like starting at the age of 8. Sometimes it's mostly based on colleagues and work. Snack break.
for the love of Pete, I don't even know why that was on. Sorry. Oh, my son's tutoring.
Snack break.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Listen, I love these little reflections of life.
Mm.
I love these little reflections of life.
I think that the whole like I said, I think the concept of having carrying trauma, because literally I can see certain people in my life
Yeah.
where physically, like, you cannot tell me, knowing what their past was and everything, that that isn't trauma. So
Right.
what does one do about that? I mean, is it finding physical, like, remedies, or is it also spiritually? Is it mentally? Is there like
I
something that you have to go
yeah.
into?
It's a
Because I
common
do look at it in a holistic
right.
way, you know.
It is a combination of all the above. So let me give you an example. Yesterday I had a client, and you'd be surprised how many clients meet with me in their car. She met with me in her car. Many clients meet with me in their car because it's the only place they can get away from their kids. So she was meeting with me in her car, and I asked, what would she like to focus on today? And I gave everyone a whole bunch of different choices. And I said, or we can do the internal scan. It is a little invasive, but I will see all the colors and it'll tell me what's going on. And traumas and triggers, a different word for shadow work. And she goes, that's what I want. And I said, are you sure? Because that one's invasive. That one will show me all the secrets. And she says, that's the one that I want. So we
Hmm.
did it. And as we're doing it, around certain parts of the body is tends to be where childhood trauma tends to be stored at in your body. Believe it or not, it's around the lower solar plexus above the sacral, and that like that belly button area, typically
Okay.
below. I don't know why, but that's where it tends to go. So as I'm kind of like poking around and moving myself around, all of a sudden I see certain parts flaring and certain parts are different colors, and I see her age, what caused it, and when I spoke about it, she kind of just sat there and she goes, what you just said clicked something for me. And I said, oh, great. What would that be? She goes, you identified exactly what was going on at that age with that parent. And we tend to get so good at bypassing, like, I'm just going to survive and thrive. So I'm going to forget about it and I'll just never deal with it, or it's just going to be part of my conversation between me and my therapist. But
Right.
in that moment, it's reflected huge. And she says, I thought that it was something else, but that just clicked. I just relearned something about my own body. So now I know where to focus on when it's time for me to let things go. So, for
Wow.
example, if you are having guilt in your sternum or your shoulder, it's like a roadmap. Instead of saying, "Well, I just got triggered by something. What's going on? How, do I go to the therapist now? Do I focus on cleaning the entire house?" And I say, "No, we focus on cleaning the room. Just that one small little space. If we know that conflict is stored in one area, then we focus on that area, and we do a whole series of activities that process that." I can give you another example. I
Yeah.
have an older brother who very, very smart, photographic memory, but lots of conspiracy theories. And I was talking to him for years, and I would say, "Yo, bro, you have this really large mass of energy in the upper left hand side of your brain." And he was like, "What is that?" I was like, "That's where your conflict is, but you haven't developed any kind of resolution in that area." He was like, "Well, what do I do?" I'm like, "Well, you can work with me." And he was like, "No, no, 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 I'm good, I'm good." So
Siblings don't work with them.
right. So he had been saying that for a really long time. Well, a few years ago, he was in his kitchen and he passed out. And he had a it wasn't an aneurysm, but he had some major health scares going on. They rushed him to the hospital and he had a tumor pressing in the exact same
Wow.
location of where his conflict was stored. Now, that's the worst case scenario, but that does happen because all of his conflict had overdeveloped and wasn't finding a way to find resolve. So the body then says, "Well, here's what we're going to do then. We're going to store that energy up there." He had to get it removed and it was benign, thank goodness. However, when I'm doing that second scan, I also do it for medical reasons. There are lots of individuals who are having medical anomalies. The doctor will say, "Well, this is what's happening. We don't know why." But for
Mm.
me, I have been able to track, 'cause I do work with doctors, but I have been able to track stenosis and fibromyalgia and a hypothyroid or
Wow.
hypothyroid, Hashimoto's disease, Graves' disease, because of scientifically all of the similarities of what happens with someone that has Hashimoto's in terms of intuitions, overdevelopment, underdevelopment, and colors. It is always the same for everyone with Hashimoto's, everyone with a hypothyroid, always the same. So
That's
that's my
fascinating.
evidence. Isn't that wild?
It's crazy. I think that, it's an interesting concept. And I feel like I keep on thinking of my mother who used to always say to me, like, you need to let that go because you're going to store it in your body.
You was
I feel
right.
like she
You're
was
right.
right. She was right. So,
You was
so
right.
okay. Oh gosh, and I'm sitting here like looking at my thing and I'm going, all right, I can't do this to this poor man. The amount of stuff I have written down on
You
here.
can do
So I'm gonna
anything
have
for
to
this poor man.
narrow in, focus, focus. Because I am also really fascinated by the concept of, guardians. I mean,
Mhm.
again, I was, raised in a religious background, not anymore, but back then we talked about angels.
Yeah.
And I know that you have described that what you see as, I guess, a guardian. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I might be getting
Yeah.
it wrong. Is kind of
For
like the
sure.
same concept, but a different, it's verbalized differently.
Yeah. So for me, we tend to kind of use language of is it spirit energy, is it ghost, is it guardian, is it guide. So I draw definitive, lines in the sand. And so for me, when I use the term of guardian is same as spirit. It's anything that has been in a body that it feels connected to you, right? So
Okay.
that might be bloodline, parental, grandparent, but it's also people who come in that feel connected to you that you've never met. So for example,
Hmm.
even like my my grandmother was adopted and I see her biological mother and her adopted mother who come
Oh,
in,
wow.
right? So it doesn't matter if they're in bloodline or not, they have a connection to you. That's all guardian. Now, guide, for me, in my definition, guide would be an energy that was never in a body. So I think that would be the equivalent of what an angel would be for other people who use that language.
Okay. I think that's like the one that's like hard for me to kind of wrap my
Mhm.
brain around because
That's a
I
big one.
know no, because yeah, okay, angels like in my Anglo raising,
Mhm.
we talked about angels, but it's still very hard for me to kind of figure out how all that energy kind of manifests into something that seems like, I don't know, an entity.
Yeah. Well, and here's where it gets tricky because we are raised to believe that with angel energy, and I was talking to my father about this the other day. I said, angel energy truly is the equivalent of just, energy that comes
Right.
into the of assistance. And that energy has never been in the body. It's like, but it's hard for me to think about it that way. And I said, I know, because we have to humanize everything. So we
Right.
humanize everything with halos and with wings. So we feel like there's an elevation. And I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. But in reality, it was never in a body. And even in our biblical teachings, and I was raised religious as well, we are taught that we know that they were never in a body. And I was like, exactly. And so why would it mimic this body?
Right. Well, yeah.
And that's only in our understanding. And now we have a word for that. That word is called pareidolia. And pareidolia is a word that means how our brain is wired to see human faces in everything, which is why you'll see like Mother Mary in a piece of toast,
Right.
or looking at clouds and you see a turtle. That's all pareidolia. But basically, we have pareidolia that are angels.
Well, it would also explain all those videos where they're convinced they see something and they genuinely believe it.
Mhm.
And it really is just a
Yep.
formation of
Yep.
leaves. We've kind of in our
Absolutely.
head made it
100%.
into something else.
So
That's
if we could move ourselves outside of our cultural teachings, which is angel energy must look like this, but we know it was never in a body. And I would say, great, get rid of that body. And if you want to get really, really interesting, it's like, but I can help identify where that energy came from in terms of planetary systems and more. And that is like, whoa, that's too much. That's too much. But I'm like, but that's what it is though.
well, I mean, the universe, everything, it's awfully big when we live in our little bubble here on Earth.
Right.
So
and I never push. So and I meet with people who are Hasidic Jews. I meet with Mormons. I meet with Catholics. I meet with Christians. I meet with so many different individuals. And I think it's so important that we find the common language. I'm never going to come in speaking an exact dogmatic practice that says this is the only way, because it is not. And you'd be surprised when we can remove some of our language, we actually speak the same language in terms
I
of,
agree.
who is the gatekeeper to, morality and more. We actually speak a very similar language. We just got to translate in different ways.
Interesting. Interesting. And I want to know also about, because I was trying to figure this one out, the SOS energetic imprint.
Oh, isn't that a wild one?
I had to read it a few times.
Yeah,
But can you explain exactly
Yes.
what that is? Because I feel like I need more.
You've clearly done your research, and I appreciate that. And this is a really fun one. I had a conversation with this last night with a nephew of mine who was only 8. He says, "Uncle, tell me about all the ghosts you see in my house." And I was having dinner with him yesterday, and I said, "Remember, I said, Uncle doesn't use the language of ghosts because ghosts kind of makes us feel afraid. Is there
Right.
spirit energy in this house?" And I said, well, of course there's spirit energy in this house because you're in this house and you have all of your spirits that can move around you. And he was like, well, sometimes I feel like I see this. And I said, well, you are correct, because I call them SOSs, or energetic imprints. Basically, we as humans, right, alive, we as humans, we have these really large emotions. And sometimes that large emotion might be divorce. Sometimes that large emotion might be a breakup. It might be joy, like we're going to have a baby, really, really large emotions. That large emotion, depending on how big it is, actually leaves a bit of an echo, leaves a bit of an imprint in that area. And
Okay.
what's really fascinating is that imprint will be then picked up on by someone else who's tuning in without realizing it. So
I think of what it would, they say, like where if you go into a room and there was a big traumatic event in there, you can't help but feel the heaviness of it all.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that is very true. And it also is more true for different kinds of intuitives, because there might be someone who walks into a completely empty room and feel nothing. Then there's the people who walk into an empty room and say, something feels off. Something feels off here. And in reality, you're most likely picking up on either spirit energy or just some kind of echo consciousness, which is an echo of that consciousness, which
Okay.
is also really affirming, because the majority of people who think that they are experiencing a haunting, no one died there. No one died there. It would be because you're picking up on the consciousness of what, was actually in that place, which really makes you double think, I'm going to really make sure that I'm not expressing a lot of rage and fear anymore.
Yeah.
Because that can be picked up on by someone
But
else.
so can joy, right?
Absolutely. So, for example, that's one of the reasons why, you have those stories of this little stretch of highway is always haunted by this
Oh,
spirit. And
yeah.
I would say, well, it's not haunted, but you are literally driving through a consciousness of echo energy. I'm visiting my family right now, and they live in the middle of the woods, and there's a little strip of highway. Every time I drive past it, there's always a gentleman who sits in the back seat. And instead of becoming fearful, the first time I saw him in the rearview mirror, I was like, well, who are you? And he pointed, and I could see his property. And I was like, oh, you're from the property here. And he always just kind of looks out the window as we drive past, and then he's always gone. And it's always during this little strip of property that we drive past. And it's because he loved the property. It was a part of who he was. And that's
It's
it.
funny because I often talk about the fact that I bought my parents' vacation home in Florida.
Mm.
So I have 10 brothers and sisters, and we
Woo!
used to all vacation here.
Wow.
Yeah, no, seriously. Like
Are you
old
sure
school
you're not
Catholic
Mormon?
thing. Telling you. So we would all take turns coming down here to vacation. And so what I love about this house, and I always say, no matter what happens in my life, I'm never getting rid of this house, is because I feel like the walls are seeping with happiness,
You're right.
because it's like remnants of years and years of people coming here and with such great memories. So I think that makes sense. Again, like I said, I'm a skeptic, but yet that's the things I believe.
Right. But listen, but you're actually not much of a skeptic, to be honest. You are a person who needs to think scientifically, and I love that so much. In fact, I'm going to encourage you to do a little game, and any of the little viewers who are at home can do this as well.
Ooh.
If you go on to Zillow or Redfin, and you can look up all of the old homes that you grew up with, you can type in the address, look it up, and if it was ever sold, it will pull up on Zillow or Redfin. And I do this practice all the time. You can go back and you can look at the room of your childhood home, or the house that you lived in when you were in your teenage years, and you can literally see yourself in that space. Just from your photos on your phone, you can see yourself. Wow, that's where I was breaking up with my boyfriend. That's where my dad and I got in an argument. And you literally see your energy in that space. That is the easiest way to tune into your old SOSs. Like, wow, that's real, because I feel it. I'm still connected to that space even though I grew up.
That's fascinating. I love
Isn't that
that.
wild?
I love
So,
that.
but what you're saying,
Okay.
you feel it. Go on.
I have one more question, even though like I have about 10 more things in here, but I have one more
Yay.
question. And the only reason I'm like, I have to focus on this one, because my friend Ray,
Mhm.
he was watching your content because I was telling him about you, and he was looking it up and everything. And he says, I want to know how he figures out when people are lying, because I would be omnipotent as soon as I know. He's a nut. But the point is that he was like,
I like Ray.
you talk.
I like him.
He's like, ask him that. I want to know how he can figure that out. Can we be taught? Because you have explained, like
Yeah.
when watching, I first time I heard you say it, we were watching a video,
Mhm.
and you said, I already know this is fake because I can see the lie lines.
Yes.
Tell me, because
Isn't
I'm
that
fascinated.
so wild?
And if we could all learn this skill, like really.
Well, and here's the thing: most people do tune into this. So let's say that for someone, your unique intuitive ability is to be able to hear energy. You would hear the lie, and in fact, most parents actually already do this. They're like, "Well, I know when my kid is lying because I can hear it." I'm like, "Yeah, that's actually a line. I see what it looks like, but you hear what it looks like." Then there's the people who are deep feelers. Like, my kid just told me a lie. I didn't hear it, but I can feel it in my stomach. Like, my kid just lied to me. That's a lie. So it's really your own super sensory ability to tune in, because I have the ability to see it visually looks like something as well. So for me, and lie lines, I can't see them all the time, but it's when someone is consciously trying to lie on purpose for certain reasons. Usually it's for attention, right? Because when you want attention for your lie, you try to pull in a lot more energy because you really want everyone to believe this. It's easier for me to see a lie line in that way. So like a nephew of mine might be like, no, I didn't break that glass. He's pulling in a lot more energy. So that energy starts to change color. And when that energy changes color, I can see the line.
So what if I mean, do you think that you see that even before they open their mouths?
Yes, I do. Now, and it happens a variety of ways. Many of the times it's way before they open their mouth, regardless if you are in person on Zoom. And I call my clients out on Zoom, like, oh, you told me a lie. They're like, and it happens all the time. Like,
Oh,
I did. But then also just on watching videos, and believe it or not, even in a photo, I can look at a photo and even if the photo is from 100 years old, it's like, well, I can identify that this was actually a lie because of the way that the colors look. Um, I'm not the only one. Like judges have a tendency to be able to tune into lies. They may not think about it intuitively, but they're drawn to that line of work because of that reason. Where it does get tricky, though, is that if you believe your lie to be truth, that's when it gets harder for me.
Oh, I can believe that.
Yeah. So there are a lot of lies that people think are truth. A lot of our presidents, regardless of your political spectrum, do that. They'll say a lie that is actually their version of a truth. So then I have to really work hard to identify.
I do think that there's some people in this world that, in order to do what they need to do, they have to believe it.
Yeah, of course.
They have to believe it. Otherwise, I don't think any sane person would do half that stuff. So.
And I think to answer Ray's question, there's lots of ways to practice. One of the great ways to practice this ability is to watch those little YouTube clips on Judge Judy, where it's like a little 4-minute clip. And as soon as the plaintiff and the defendant speak, practice like, what am I reading right now? And what am I sensing? What am I immediately locking into? Their voice, the manners, the eyes, my gut feelings, what is going on? It's a great way to practice.
You don't think all of them are lying?
Well, and that's where it gets tricky, right? So on my lunch break, I run in and I quickly make myself lunch and I put on a judge show. And I do it to always keep myself like, I don't want to, for me, when I'm tuning in, I tune in, right? And I don't want to tune out during a lunch break. So I'm watching these little judge stuff. And as soon as that plaintiff walks in the room, I'm like, lie. Or as soon as the defendant walks in the room, and sometimes the defendant will say one thing like, well, that was the truth. Oh, that was a lie. And it's always spot on. But I practice.
That is hysterical. Well, I want to tell everybody, like, of course, go look at the Light Seer on any social media. You're on Instagram, you're on TikTok. Are you on YouTube as well?
Well, I am, but I'm not. So
I know TikTok is primarily your account.
Right.
Like
TikTok
that's the place.
Primarily.
You really should be telling people to go to Instagram.
I know.
Because you've got a lot on there.
I do. And I have to admit, because I get overwhelmed with how social stuff is a little overwhelming for me. So I do post at the end of my 9-hour sessions, I go outside and I post about 4 videos. So you can always expect 4 videos from me on TikTok. I
don't know how you do that. I get exhausted with like 4 a week.
I did too. I had to train myself. But on TikTok, I'm the Light Seer. And then I have an assistant who then takes those photos or those videos and then she posts it to my Instagram, which is Aloha Light Seer. And then she'll post it onto my YouTube account, which is the Light Seer. Now, I just want to warn everyone at home that there are a lot of fake accounts out there under my name.
I noticed that.
Yeah, so please check the spelling. It's either Aloha Light Seer on Instagram or the Light Seer. And unfortunately,
and I was going to say, even on TikTok, there is like a few. Just look for the one with the biggest number.
I look for the one with the biggest number. And I think like if these people spent half the time working on themselves as they do copy and pasting my information and trying to scam money out of people, the amount of up leveling you could do by just doing your own damn work.
They need to just verify you so that way.
That's what I said. TikTok won't do it. They won't do it.
Well, usually it used to be like if you had imitators and stuff like that, and that way it was to identify that. But
not yet. At least not yet.
Well, I am like, thank you for coming on. I think this was so much fun. I think it's a topic that I always find fascinating.
Yeah.
Like I said, a jury's always going to be out for me, but that's okay. Okay.
You can ask me back any time and we will dig into anything that you want.
I would love that.
It's happening.